I'm Christie Clarkson, Marketing Specialist at Power Factors. Today I'm talking with Robert Johnson about battery energy storage systems, or BESS, and the role they play in accelerating the global transition to clean energy. Robert has been with Power Factors since 2016 and is one of our senior market advisors, working closely with product, technology, and sales teams to help guide our development and execution strategies. Hey, Robert, great to have you here. Thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, Christy. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
More and more solar and wind assets are being added to our electricity grids worldwide. In fact, by early next year, it's predicted that wind and solar will contribute more than a third of the world's total electricity generation. Can you explain the problem of intermittency and how battery energy storage systems are enabling this growth thanks to their ability to ensure a reliable and predictable energy supply from wind and solar assets?
Sure. One of the beautiful things about energy produced with wind and solar is that the fuel source is free. We don't pay for the wind to blow or the sun to shine, but we do have to pay for the fuel needed for dirtier carbon-based energy sources like coal or natural gas. Those require considerable infrastructure to extract from the earth, to process and distribute, and that process itself consumes a considerable amount of energy. The downside is we don't really have control over when and where the solar fuel is available. We know that the sun rises and sets every day at a predictable time, but we don't know how precisely or intense it will be shining during a particular hour in a day. Similarly, we know that wind blows generally in predominant patterns. And even though our forecasts are getting better and better, there will always be limits to their accuracy. Now, consider that from the grid's perspective, we need to continuously balance load and generation in real time. When the load is larger than the available renewable energy being generated, that missing generation has to come from somewhere, and it's often from less clean sources like natural gas or coal. And conversely, when there's a surplus of renewable energy being generated that exceeds the load on the grid, what happens is we have to back off or curtail that energy. And without somewhere to store excess energy from wind and solar, curtailment is almost like throwing away free energy. Now, storage systems give us a powerful new tool to manage this dynamic balance between load and generation. So rather than curtail wind and solar when they are in excess, we can store that energy by charging batteries. And when there's not enough wind or solar for the load, we can discharge that stored energy back into the grid. This is a big simplification, of course, but hopefully it gives you a general idea of what's happening. Energy storage is really a long-awaited catalyst that's now enabling us to deploy more solar and wind assets and at a faster pace. One of our goals here at Power Factors is to help accelerate this process and ultimately hasten the energy transition.
Thanks for all that great context. Now that we understand a bit more about why BESS is so important to the clean energy transition, can you explain how BESS assets differ physically from wind and solar assets?
Yeah, so storage systems complement solar and wind in really important ways, but they're still a fundamentally different asset class. Not only do they have different physical characteristics, but these physical characteristics are intimately impacted by how systems are operated, which create additional complexities that you don't really see with wind and solar assets alone. And batteries involve electrochemical processes, which involve a different set of operating parameters to monitor and KPIs to manage. These include things like state of charge, state of health, round-trip efficiency, cycle counts, and more. They also have unique safety considerations. Because of their electrochemical nature, they're more sensitive to temperature than wind and solar. Lithium ion, which is the most common chemistry today, also suffers from a dangerous phenomenon called thermal runaway when not managed correctly, which is a phenomenon where cells enter an uncontrollable self-heating state, which eventually leads to smoke, fire, or even cells venting gas and shrapnel. This requires careful monitoring and management of the thermal systems like the liquid cooling and HVAC, as well as the safety systems like fire suppression. Degradation is also an important consideration. Unlike solar, which has a well-understood and relatively linear degradation over time, that's not the case with lithium-ion. These systems have a finite number of charge and discharge cycles and total energy throughput before their economic life is exhausted. So, rapid cycling and deep discharges consume them quickly, while gentler cycling and discharging conserves and lengthens their economic life. In a sense, batteries are consumed rather than operated. And how a system is dispatched into the market will determine how successfully that project or that asset meets its financial targets over the life of the asset.
Thanks, Robert. Look forward to seeing you in the next video where we'll talk about the challenges associated with managing BESS assets.